with a production program to do it on YouTube. So I got to do it on TV. I got to record it on YouTube. So I couldn't record it yesterday. I might or might not be able to record it tomorrow because I guess there's all kinds of problems with TVs. This is what we call dealing with monopolies. Monopolies don't care because they have a monopoly. And 2 or 3 companies, if they control market, operate like a monopoly, which is our world. So let's go ahead then and take out your notes. Hey, who invented a workable steam engine? Who invented that steam engine? James Watt. Yeah. And what section of the country do they have all the iron and coal? What section of the country? Yeah, not Manitoba. Who wants to go to Manitoba? Who's been to Manitoba? Am I the only one who's been to beautiful Winnipeg? Actually, it's a very nice town. It's really surprising. Big. But compared to Montana, you know, that's pretty big. And what city in Massachusetts did they have a system of regimented workers, etc.? Say it again. Lowell, yeah. Who had memorized the textile mill, brought it here? Memorized it. You remember? Brought it from England. Yeah, Samuel Slater. And how did they teach? Or who did they recruit first? Recruit. Yeah, girls. Our boys taught what we call it schools. Not necessarily bad, not necessarily good. Every time the bell rings, it'd be nothing but little robots. Not really, but kind of. Moving on. Let's go and get going on this. So innovation. There was a little video I was going to show you, but my speakers don't work. We're gonna have to do my entire computer, and they won't let me do it because I would just break it. New ones, so they don't trust me. You notice I put this all on film too. I was lying. So innovation breeds innovation. Once you have a power source, boom, innovation comes. You know, the steam engine. The Greeks invented. Greek philosophers invented the steam engine back in 150 BCE, but it had no real practical use. It was a toy. Now a new steam engine now has practical use because of the Industrial Revolution. And once you have a power source, more innovation. So you really see innovation just explode once electricity. Just explode. You need a power source. And that's part of the reason why people think so many things are being invented now. Yeah, they're being invented now because you have a power source. Now, innovation breeds innovation. So, one more thing I'll say. So I mentioned Isaac Newton before. So Newton, in his Principia Mathematica, that's where you get gravity, but he also invented calculus. And he made it very clear. He did not do it himself. He was standing on the shoulders of giants, namely Johannes Kepler, but on others. And so this is what modern innovation is. Other innovation, you take that and make something else. Rarely is it all brand new, almost never, which to be expected. Speaking of that, who likes calculus? There's only 3 of us who like calculus. 4? Anybody else? Anybody else? No calculus fans? Who's in calculus? So some of you don't like it as much as others. Okay. Calculus was the only math I really liked. I have a math degree too in history. Got lots of stuff. College. So, and it was cheaper back then too. So that helped. What did Morse innovate? What did he make? What is that? Telegraph. Telegraph. He invented, so Samuel Morse invented the telegraph. You might have heard of Morse code. He invented that for the telegraph. So there's a desperate need for communication, especially with the railroads. And what this basically did is it sent a little electrical impulse. You have a little battery, and you tap this little button. It basically connects 2 wires and sends a little jolt of electricity down the line. So It's not really words, it's just a little bit of electricity. And they had a primitive headset, best way to describe it, to hear. It would go down a steel cable, maybe 30 miles, and then it would just dissipate where you couldn't hear anymore. And this is pre-amplification, so really, really hard to hear. Wouldn't be till Thomas Edison's lab where we get amplification. They would run those waves through charcoal. Seems very weird, but that's what the first speakers were. So anyways, you have to have somebody listening, and all you can hear is a little bit of static. So, short bit of static, long bit of static. Morse code, dots, dashes. And that's how it happened. So you have to come up with some symbol. Anybody know Morse code a little bit? Little bit here and there. I remember years ago I learned some of it, but if you don't use it, it goes pretty fast. But that could be sent in. News, it would take a while, and you had to have every 30 miles, you had to have somebody listening and then send it down the line. Anyone ever play the game telephone? The game I'm telling you about where you whisper something, you whisper. That's the way the early telegraph lines were. It would go 30 miles here and here and here. So yeah, there'd be some major mistranslation. You hear one dot wrong, think it's a dash, but everything could be different. But that's all of a sudden overnight information could happen. And the first one's very basic. To warn, hey, the bridge is out, stop the train. Basic stuff. But here's the big thing it led to. Here's the big thing. First off, news and information. So just jot down news and information. I know that seems obvious, but more than just simply having the news of the day, the events, laws, political debates, catastrophes, new inventions. The other big news it would be like commodity prices, stock prices. Give business people an advantage. Overnight, you can get that information. That would revolutionize the market. Here's the next thing, and this is as important, but not considered as much. It allowed for bigger business, because you could operate many different businesses from one location. So with the telegraph, now you can sit in New York City and operate your coal mines and iron mines in Western Pennsylvania and New York. And sit in New York. Instead of being there all the time. That allows for bigger as a competitive advantage. Morse code would be everything. By the way, what would be developed because of Morse code? To signal danger, catastrophe, you need help. Heard of SOS? Yeah, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Anybody know what SOS stands for? No, that's no meaning. S was 3 dots. O, 3 dashes. S, 3 dots. So it's easy to hear. It was very easy to pick out SOS. If you use one with dots and dashes, it might be more difficult, and you could do it really fast. So later on, you could save our ship and stuff like that. That would come after they came up with the initial SOS. It's just SOS just meant something we could transmit quickly and easily over these brand new things called wireless radios, which are coming about 60 years after Morse did this. So there's a change on whatever SOS. Hey, what did Elias Howe invent? Sewing machine. What a massive invention. The sewing machine. So we now have textile mills, but now that next step, rapidly and more efficiently make clothing or anything else that comes from textiles overnight. And not we've all, but many of us, I've done it. Try to sew by hand, little bits by hand. It's very difficult, time consuming, and the stitches are kind of inconsistent, especially my work. Sewing machine, very consistent, much potentially, it can be much more durable and so much faster. Now, the first home sewing machine, see if it's hand cranked. You had to go like this. But to a belt in a factory, mass production. Overnight. Boom. It's no coincidence. You have steam engine, 15 years later, you have Elias Howe. And then the Civil War started, you need a bunch of uniforms. Fiber clothing would come out of the Civil War. We need lots of uniforms fast. We can't measure people. So we'll come up with just a guy. See, that's kind of the average size. We'll call it medium. That came from the Civil War. Small, medium, large, Civil War, all came from there. So the world, little things that seem little, massive changes. Hey, Remember Eli Whitney? What's this? Cotton gin. Everybody write down the cotton gin. We already have interchangeable parts. We will come back to this, but the cotton gin would meet the demand of the textile mills and make slavery unbelievably profitable. War is coming. So those are three. Let's get enough. Anybody know what John Deere invented? I knew somebody would say the tractor. Thank you. No, that'd be his descendants. But his factory, his company would do it. I think John Deere and tractors too. He invented the steel tip plow. Steel tip plow. And with it, it could cut through the hard soil of the Midwest much more efficiently and faster, and therefore less time. So here is the 20 years later, John Deere plow. And then therefore it's a big company when they come up with, well, steam powered and then internal combustion engine powered tractors. They're coming. Here's the plow, and this scours the dirt off. So it plows a much deeper and cleaner cut. And then you would sit here in complete discomfort, and then 3 or 4 mules would pull it. Cyrus McCormick. What was his big innovation? It's right there. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, they call it the harvester, but we generically call it the reaper. He called it the harvester, but it was a reaper. So, what is someone who reaps? They have a scythe, and they'll cut, let's say it's wheat, and they cut down the shaft, and then they take it, and now you have all the corn, the grain on top. They've got to like beat it on a rock, and then the grain would fall off. It's hard, very labor intensive. It takes a lot of people. His first reaper could do the work of 10 people, and by the end of the century, the work of 30. So it'd be pulled by horses. This blade right here would cut the wheat, and then would go into this, and that would turn. And it would kind of, the wheat would kind of beat against each other, and the grain would fall to the bottom by gravity, and then just discharge the shaft behind. Have you heard of a combine? A combine is a reaper on the grand scale. So this could do the work of 10, then later 30 people pulled by horses first. Is this good or bad for farmers? The answer is yes. It's good and bad. Sure, it produces more. You can get more work out of one person. But what about small farmers? How are you going to pay for this? Well, either you go out of business because you can't compete, or where do you get the money? Debt. And if you produce more, what happens to prices? They drop. Are you getting out of debt? Mechanization seemed like a boom, but it will crush small farms. Also, one more thing about small farms. Small farms, who are your workers? If you let's say I'm giving you the generic nuclear family, husband and wife, who are the workers? Children. Got lots of kids. Got lots of kids. They're good little workers. You might even know their name. How do you know these kids? Remember the low system? Farm life was done, taken place. Off to the factory. Boys, off to the coal. Or to the city, to become factory workers. Small farms, this is the beginning. But to the combine binge comes in the 1970s. So, big innovation, but nothing was more innovative than railroads. I mentioned this once before, but it just changed everything. You need massive amounts of coal providing the heat for more and better iron, and eventually coal and iron production would lead to, after the Civil War, the most important production, the most important thing, steel. Light, strong, efficient. But also you need more efficient business practices, the creation of a corporation. Here is an old stock certificate from the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the B&O. And then modern finance. Business needs banking to operate, and corporations need banks called investment banks to help them set up, and therefore modern banking. And I just found a picture of a trestle, give you an idea how important iron and steel was. Look at that wooden trestle. That's in Idaho. Doesn't that look about as rickety and scary as possible? And it's all wood. And there's smoke, they're burning. The soot comes out, it might catch that thing on fire. So you need steel. And you need trained personnel to build tunnels. That's on the old Great Northern Railroad in Montana. That tunnel is on the Clark Fork River. I've seen that tunnel. You can go into that tunnel, even though the Burlington Northern Santa Fe still uses it. And there was a major derailment 2 years ago in front of that tunnel. Because they don't put money into the tracks. They dumped something like 17 boxcars of Coors Light beer into the Clark Fork River, which was just this surreal scene of these yahoos trying to get free beer out of the river. Okay, moving on. Oh, I found in one of my grandma's stuff, which she passed away, she had these papers. And there were a bunch of stock certificates from an old corporation in Omaha, Nebraska that had gone out of business. She bought stock in. Still had the certificates. That was really cool. Today, if you own stock, some of you might own stock. Your parents might own stock. I own some stock. It's no longer certificates. It's a number on a computer screen. So, railroads, though, key innovation. Next, but why America? Why America why were they ready for that American fix? Why were they ready for interchangeable parts? Why? I mean, this is a big deal. And I put a picture of, a new modern steam engine, iron ship making. You can float iron. Interchangeable parts. Why America? What's these three big factors why America? First off, we had more demand, more people ready to buy stuff than any place else. The United States had the largest middling class. That's what they used to call the middle class. I've mentioned the middle class before, and let's make sure we get a definition. What is the middle class? Not in the middle. It is not in the middle. It is not the median. It is in between two things. So let's get this down. If you didn't know, jot down a couple things because I want to make sure you know this. It's something that's important to know. So we have three basic classes. The smallest class on top, upper class. They have enough money for survival. They don't necessarily need to work. And they can afford the trappings of an upper class life. Home. The big one in the 19th century, the higher working class people took the servants. That was a big deal. And then, you own your own land, you can pass wealth on to your children. Today, you think of upper class is you have enough wealth to afford a home without going into debt. You can afford to send your children to college without debt. You can buy products without debt. That's kind of upper class too. And it's very smart. And then the vast majority of people are working class. Today, as in then. So working class, what does it mean? Basically, they have to work to survive. Makes sense, right? They can afford a few things, but they have to go into a great amount of debt. I mean, most people then could not afford to buy a home, and most people today could not afford to buy a home without going into a great amount of debt. Those of you who know anything about home ownership know exactly what I'm talking about. A great amount of debt. And the average home loan today is a 30-year mortgage. That's a lifetime of debt. Now, doesn't mean it's not worth it. A home is a great amount of value, but most people can't afford it. But they couldn't, like in the 19th century, afford it. Or in the South, afford it. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the average. The median's like 800,000. Yeah. But you know what is in Helena? Yeah, the median's about 550,000, which is a lot. Yeah.
Where's that house selling on my street for like 800?
And it's probably a nice place, but it's amazing, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, this is the most expensive the housing market. And Montana is one of, if not the most expensive places. Because the housing values are really high and the wages are low. Really expensive. telling you the reality of Montana, which is sad because I grew up and I live in Montana and want people to stay here. But moving on, this graph really shows the difference. Oh, and then in the middle class is this, middle class. They have to work. They have to work to survive, but they can afford some of the trappings of an upper class one. Does that make sense? They can afford a few of the things. Maybe they can afford a little bigger house. In the 19th century, they could get a servant. So hire somebody from the working class to be their servant. Or in the South, you can afford one or two enslaved people. That's when you've made it. That's middle class. So today would be like, you don't have to go into as much debt to buy a house for the sake of kids in college. Does that make sense? You can afford to buy a car and the debt situation. That's the thing. The middle class got really big for a while. It's shrinking, but it's still always, it's relatively small, but a lot bigger than the upper class, but not big as a working class. This chart, Thomas Piketty is a very well-known, very accomplished French economist, and I like the name Piketty. He did some pretty exhaustive research on wealth. It's really hard to figure out wealth. We can figure out income. Income is this, but wealth is difficult because how much is something worth? Doesn't it change all the time? When we mentioned real estate, well, real estate's actually, even though it's still really high in Helena, in Montana, it's going down. Actually fairly fast. But it's still really, really, really high. And how much is fine art worth? Fine art might be worth a lot to somebody, but not worth a lot to somebody else. So wealth is hard to figure out. It's variable. And the things that fluctuate in value insanely, like gold, or even more, up and down all the time, like cryptocurrency. It's impossible to figure out wealth. So my point is, wealth is hard to figure out. So Piketty did one of the best examples of this, and he did wealth basically from 1800 to about 2010. And this is Britain. This is the wealth in the top 1%. And notice at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, it was about 55%. All the wealth is in 1%. If all the wealth is in 55% of the wealth is in 1%, that means 45% has to be distributed amongst the remaining 99%. Do you see the problem? Most people won't have money to buy stuff, demand is low. And look what happens with the Industrial Revolution. It goes up. France. The United States significantly lower, 25% in 1800. That means there's more money in the hands of everybody else, so they can afford to buy more. By the way, look what happens with the Industrial Revolution in the US. Wealth focuses to the top. Do you notice what happens to the wealth of the 1%? All three countries is worldwide, goes down. That was conscious government policy until 1980. We reverse that policy, and now wealth is focusing to the top. Here it's about 35% in 2010. Now it's about anywhere from 40 to 45% of the wealth in the U.S. Focusing, like it's just accelerating at a rate that's unprecedented to the top ones. So more money, that's the point. That's a pretty clear example why, wealth focuses at the top, there's less money for everybody else. So there's less money for people to buy stuff, which is happening right now. Oh, before we add this, I'll tell you, stat I've mentioned before, but I'll say it again. Unprecedented. 90 or 50% of all consumption today is done by the top 10%. That means a tiny little group's buying half of everything. That means the bottom 50% must. Really must be hard. Really has to be suffering. So back to this. Shortage of labor. There weren't as many skilled craftsmen, so they accepted machines. France had a lot of skilled craftsmen. So the Industrial Revolution hit France lower, which would really hurt them going into the 20th century. And when war became industrialized, World War I. So there wasn't as much complaining and resistance to machines taking jobs because there weren't as many skilled craftsmen. But after the Civil War, when machines started to replace the skilled workers that remained, it's too late. They're all going to be replaced. That's something that today we're seeing a little bit of that. Almost all the economic growth in the United States today is for generating AI. And the reason why businesses are investing so much is because they believe it will replace workers and drop wages. That's what they believe. Now, will that happen? Probably not, but close to what they said, even though it probably will happen. So that's why it's kind of, it's a bubble now. Brace yourself. It's a bubble. Bubbles burst. So, next, education. We've already mentioned education to train you all to follow the clock, right? But the United States was the most educated country in the world. In fact, in the North, there was 90% literacy by the Civil War, men and women, which was unprecedented worldwide. The South was significantly lower, partially because of slavery, but even amongst whites, it's probably closer to 70% literacy. The South is always, to this day, had lower, even though Mississippi has made some remarkable gains recently, but I think part of that is because they were really low. So it had a lot of room to go up. Montana used to be just amazing. We're still good, but not what we used to be. Except for you people. You guys are nuts. You feel good about yourself? No, we're still pretty hot. It's just not quite. So that's the concept of public education. And no other person would be more responsible for pushing the idea of public education than Horace Mann. I don't know why I like that picture of Mann in the corner, but I do. And its concept was of universal education. And when I mean universal, I mean he believed everybody should be educated, but not exactly in the same way. I mean, not naturally, women should not have to get the same technical education as men. So he was skipping about 48% of the population, but still, it was one of those big steps, maybe not big enough. But here's the big thing you have to get down. Who pays for it? Well, okay, the government goes through the government. That means who pays for it? It's the people. So this is what you have to get. The people provide the money, taxpayer money. The people provide a little bit of their wealth to pay for public education, seeing that as a public good. So there's a little element of something kind of socialistic. And you'll see it, people, it's generally a more conservative economics is kind of anti-education. We'll come back to this more a little bit later. More liberal economics down the road would be more pro-education. Here's an older classroom, and people had to be packed in. It was incredibly expensive. An abacus. Anybody ever use an abacus? Yeah, that was just kind of like little toys. I mean, they're really, when I was in first, second, third grade, we still use one for class. To use it. Your math. And I know what you're thinking. How old are you? Old. Anybody ever use a slide rule? You know what I've used it. Anyone know what it is? You do pretty upper division math without a calculator. Yeah, it's like it. Remember I told you skills are lost in a generation? Skills are lost in a generation. In the 1970s, you would have went to an engineering class in college. My college class for engineering, you didn't have upper level math classes. They all had slides. So they did everything. By the 1990s, nobody knows. It's amazing how fast we lose those things. Back to this. So there are two main goals that Mann said. You need an educated citizenship to make decisions in a republic. Horace Mann. Educated citizens to make decisions in a republic. And you need to have workers. Which one's more important? To Mann, it was citizenship. To people like Thomas Jefferson, it was good citizens. But you can imagine what the new capitalists want. They don't want to pay to train workers. They want the public to train workers, and then they reap the benefits of an educated workforce. What's more important today? Good citizenship or workers? It's not even. It's workers. Trained to be workers. Trained to get a job. And it might be presented to you as you get the skills to get a job, it's very good for you. Don't forget, it's also very good for employers. Doesn't make it bad, doesn't make it good. But there are issues with not having well-educated citizens. So, speaking of that gives me an opportunity to show this test, supposedly from third grade. I don't know, but I enjoyed it immensely, so I'm going to show it to you. Do you get the joke? Okay, I find this very funny. I'm betting, I don't know if it's real or not. I want it to be real. One word they can spell. But moving on. Let's get to capitalism, and we made it. Adam Smith is considered the father of modern economics, and therefore this is still pre-capitalism. He would write one of the most influential books in history. Now, it's a long title. Everyone calls it The Wealth of Nations. Books in the 18th century have really long names. So the theory of moral sentiments and inquiry because the nature of causes of Wealth of Nations. Everyone calls it Wealth of Nations. That's all you need to know, Wealth of Nations. But put down the date. I want everybody, let's put down a different date. Let's take a little quiz. What year did the United States declare independence? Everybody write it down. This is a date you should know by heart. And if you don't know, keep it to yourself because that is a major indictment of you. Put it down. What year did the United States declare independence? Put it down. If you don't know, I'm not kidding. You got to know stuff. Don't be one of them. There's far too many of them. And if you don't know, I'm not bragging. What year? 1776. Damn well better know that. I would be embarrassed. I'm picking people on individual. I'm just telling you, but there are a few. Embarrassed. So, but I also get embarrassed by things like that. I don't want to be the person. I don't want to be one of them. So I do like to know stuff. Moving on, that's what Yuri wrote it. So kind of a big year. 1776, the year, the same year. And Hamilton loved it. Jefferson loved it. The book, if you actually read it, is very complex. People quote from it all the time. They never actually read it. It's hard to read. I had to read it first in college. I have a minor in economics. I have 4 majors and 2 minors. I have a minor in economics, and we had to read it for a class. And I remember reading it, I thought this is really interesting, but you know how you get a book for class? Because even if it's a really good book, it's never as good when you have to read it. It's never as good. And so I had to read it, I'm like, okay, what do I need to know? Every one of us has done it. But then I read it just on my own. It's really interesting. The problem is 18th century prose, there's no grammatical rules. That's clogging, distracting. So like there's a sentence that's a whole page. It's very weird to read. We have to read this really long sentence, and we're used to sentence. It was odd. I recommend it if you're really interested in economics, but maybe not the first thing you read on economics. That's one thing I wish we had economics. We do not. Because of budget cuts, we probably never will. Economics is not business. What is economics? Just to remind you, remember, it's how you deal with scarce items, scarce resources. So it's the production of it, it's consumption, transfer of wealth, whatever it takes. That is economics. So make sure you understand economics. Economics is not business. Business is buying, marketing, production of goods for a profit. So if you think economics is that, you're going to be wrong and you will be misled down the road. Trust me. So that's Adam Smith. Anybody know what country Adam Smith is from? Scotland. Even though part of the British Empire. That's a picture of Adam Smith, that green poster by a former student of mine. Face, who's now a graphic designer. Adam Smith, always perpetually facing north. Beautiful Edinburgh, Scotland. Who's been to Edinburgh? Who's had haggis? Does anybody know what haggis is? Spiced beast wrapped in the stomach of a lamb. Stomach. I had it. And then the person who served it said to us, only tourists are dumb enough to eat this. Moving on. What he talked about here was an idealized free market. Now, it's an idealized situation. Capitalism is a form of a market economy. So we're talking about the beginnings of capitalism. even though this is pre-capitalism. Now, I put it in quotes for one very simple reason. There's never been a free market. There's never been a fully free market in the history of the world. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. Any effort to have a free market where you have anyone can come in, just no rules, we all come in and just kind of buy and sell goods openly, whatever price we want, make profit, whatever we want, is always ruined by somebody. There'll be a market, and then somebody will come in with a bat and beat somebody up and take their money. Or take over their business and drive all their competitors out with a gun. It's never happened. There's always rules. There's always things that make it less free. But this is idealized. He had borrowed extensively from 3 Arab philosophers from Baghdad in the 1300s. Just like, remember, Jefferson borrowed from Thomas Locke, or from Thomas Locke. So let's get to it. What he said was the most efficient form of business, market, and the transference of goods was a free market, where everybody's operating in competition, free, open competition. Anyone can buy, anyone can sell, anyone can enter it, all acting in their own self-interest. Everybody acting with rational decisions. They come up with a choice and they'll make the best decision for themselves every time. So producers of goods will always make the best decisions on cost and value and product and price, and consumers will always buy the best product at the best price. Because of that, there will be an effort to produce the best, have a price people can afford, and therefore be the most efficient. That alone should tell you one very important thing about a free market. Are people always rational, making sound, good decisions? Absolutely. All the time. I've never seen a bad decision in my life. Stupid decisions all the time. And they base it on greed or just anger or just lack of knowledge. I mean, think about how many times you've gone in and bought something and have no idea what you're buying. You have no idea. No idea. And that means I would say 99.9% of the time you have no idea. Did you see them make that hamburger at McDonald's when you bought it? You have any idea? You know what's in your phone? You have any idea? It's just there. You just buy it. You don't know if the guy putting the brakes in your car was hungover that morning. You have no idea. You just bought it. So it's really hard to make rational decisions because we don't know. So that alone should tell you one of the reasons why his talk was idealized. So when we talk about a free market today, what we mean is more free, not control, more free, but not really actually free, because that's never happened. It can't. So what is the market then? A free market, supply and demand sets the price. Supply and demand. The interaction of supply and demand. Has anyone taken a business class and seen that little supply and demand curve? I know they have a little bit of economics in business, even though they're not directly the same thing. You have a big advantage if you know economics in business, but it's not the same. That's a little curve. It's generic. It's not terribly accurate, but it gives you a basic idea. Supply and demand. They'll find a price. And this is how the supply and demand curve works. All right. If the price is low, if the price is low, they won't produce much. That's supply. But when the price goes up, they produce more. Price goes up, produce more. So, price is going up, people make more. More people enter the market. Demand's the same way. Demand, if the price is really high, they won't buy as much. But as the price drops, they buy more. Very generic. But once I say that, it's very intuitive, right? That part's intuitive. It's more complex, but we're just getting the basics. This is what Adam Smith laid out. Now, like I said, this is done in business classes, the little economics unit. This is revolutionary when Adam Smith read it. Jefferson's like, what? You're putting into words I couldn't figure out before. I just couldn't put it together. So he called that interaction of supply and demand, this equilibrium of price and would find, called the invisible hand of the market. And ideally, let the market decide. If you charge too much and the demand's not there, you go out of business. But if no one's going to buy your goods. If you're a consumer, you pay too much for a good, you'll run out of money. Or you don't charge enough as a business, you don't get profit, you go out of business. A number of things. Charge too much, your competitors will come in. This was the best system, he said, in an idealized market. So you want something more free and let the price here. If you set the price, that would lead to some kind of inequalities. Either hurt the consumers or hurt the producers, whatever you are in the market. So here's the problem though. In competition, there's a great amount of risk. If you start a small business in an idealized market where everyone can enter, you're putting up your own resources. Some of you probably have relatives, friends, maybe direct family who own a small business. I bet a lot of you do. And you probably have an idea how risky it is. Putting up your own money, it's scary. It's hard. And I bet there's a lot of you that have a direct connection with this. That's one of the things why small farming is so risky, because that's a small definition of a small business. Money. So the point is, it's really risky. Competition means risk because your competitors are trying to do what? Take away your consumers, take away your market. It's hard. So we understand that concept. So let's get to the main element. We all know what profit is. Let's get to what it is. Have you ever heard the term profit margin? Profit margin is the difference between revenues, the amount of money you get in, and your cost. Everyone got that? Amount of money you bring in, your cost. The bigger that gap, the more money you make. The smaller that gap, the less money you make. And if the gap goes the other way, uh-oh. And don't forget, revenues cost, a lot of that cost could be debt. You need that extra profit margin to pay back your debt. So, revenues minus cost. Here's the problem. Now, don't write this one down. What can a business control? Can they control revenues or costs? Yeah, they really can't control revenues. In a free market where everyone can enter, you can't say, oh, my product is so good, I'll jack my prices. Competitors will come in. We're talking in a free market. We're not talking a monopoly. Not talking to them. We're dominated by monopolies. So, you control costs. You control the cost, but there's one cost you can't control. You need machines, raw materials, the land you're on. Okay, we can try to get the best deal on that. You have some control over it. You produce things faster, more efficient, you make some money that way. But what's the one thing you can't? Even though that's a really important matter, in a free open market, ideally you would be like paying the same cost for the raw materials. How about wages? Can you control that? Let's say you have workers for you, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to cut my costs, I cut their wages. What will your workers do in an idealized free market? Go to a different job. They can't control wages. And that is the big cost they can't control. What causes wages in a free market, aka capitalism? It's called the wage system. Wages are set by the wage system. And this is going to be the most controversial and hated part of capitalism by many Americans. And today, it's just kind of accepted. Hey, what sets wages today? The skill set wages today? Skill does not set wages. How about hard work? Nope. Doesn't set wages. Skill only sets wages if that skill is in demand. That skill isn't in demand. Or if there's a bunch of people with the same skill, no, wages drop. Get into science and you find out about dropping wages. It's a real thing. It's massive being about. What sets wages? Wages are set by write this down. Market. Just like all prices, workers literally sell their labor. They're not set by skill. How about hard work? Does anyone have a job where they actually work, okay, get a W-2. Do you get a W-2? For tax purposes? That means they take money out for social security. You don't make enough to pay the income tax, but you all pay social security if you have a job. And you work with other people. If like if you're the only employer of one person, it's different. But when you work with a lot of other people, what's pay based on? If you work with anybody, it's paid exactly the same as you, and they don't do anything. They don't do anything, they just sit there and do nothing, or you're that person who sits there and do nothing? Yeah, could be. You're all paid the same, aren't you? Because wages are set by them. Wages are set by the market. They're not set by hard work. Hard work only matters if there's a real shortage of workers who will do something. Hey, if there's high unemployment, what happens to wages? High unemployment. Wages go down. Doesn't matter how hard you work. Doesn't matter. Wages go down. So right after COVID, there's a shortage of workers, and all of a sudden you start seeing places like McDonald's advertising in Helena, $17 an hour for some jobs. For some jobs, they always put $17 an hour job. There's an asterisk next to it. I don't know if you noticed that. They always put that little asterisk. Wages haven't gone up. Why? There's not a shortage of workers anymore. Because we have a little bit of inflation, that's actually a wage cut. Wages go down. Because we are now kind of in a very tight, it's a very loose labor. That's how wages are set. Hey, one more question before we go. This is a big one. If profits go up, though, profits for the company, what does that do to your wages? Has no effect at all. None. Profits have no effect. A company could be making money, but if it's bad economic times, they could be cutting wages. Could that ever happen? No. Would companies actually just get more work out of their workers and pocket all the value from their work? Yeah, one thing's making record profits. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, you work harder and you don't get the benefit of your hard work. See the issue? To the belly? And you skipped yesterday. New path. Goodbye, everybody.
I'm looking at my manager.